The Daily Item sat down with Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro on Thursday afternoon for an exclusive interview on a variety of topics.
Attorney General, thanks for sitting down with us. I appreciate you making time for us. Obviously, busy guy, so we appreciate giving us a little time. Big thing we wanted to talk about was, I think we're 10 or 11 months since the grand jury report came out. Obviously, that kind of dominated our news world for 6 months. It's kind of fallen a little off the radar, though, now in the last couple of months. So what do you have to say about sort of your feelings on the sort of the fallout after it and the sort of where things stand now?
Yeah. Well, I can't speak to the press coverage of it. You'd be better suited to explain why the press covers what they cover. But I can tell you that since we released a report back on August 14th, significant actions have taken place inside and outside of law enforcement. So let's just examine the facts. We released a report on August 14th. We immediately set up a clergy abuse hotline. Mm-hmm. And that hotline to date has received 1,803 calls. We follow up on every single one of those calls that comes in. That's really significant. The other thing that is quite significant is I have spoken to nearly every one of my colleague attorneys general from around the country. I think last we checked it was like 46 that we have spoken to about this topic. And so far, 20 of them have publicly acknowledged some type of investigation. The most recent was last week in Michigan, okay, where Attorney General Nessel, who had campaigned on a pledge of investigating this, arrested, I believe it was 7 predator priests. Please check that it was 5, 6, or 7. Sure. And she also made very clear that there's a long way to go in her investigation. In addition to that, I've met with both Attorney General Sessions and Attorney General Barr, spoken with them, and as the feds have publicly indicated, they've launched a probe. So if anything, the law enforcement response to what we unearthed back on August 14th, 2018 is just in its nascent stages. And remember, everything I'm sharing with you is what's publicly available, and there's additional things happening behind the scenes. Outside of law enforcement, you've seen many states step up, ironically, and pass the grand jury reforms that were recommended here in Pennsylvania. Right. To date, that has not yet happened in Pennsylvania, though I think we have some reasons to be optimistic at this time that that will get done soon. And then within the Catholic Church, while I have been completely unsatisfied with their response, most recently today when their big idea was to set up a hotline that would come right back to the church for a victim. I mean, it's covering up the cover-up. But the fact is the Pope acknowledged the work of the 23 grand jurors. He acknowledged the pain of the thousands of victims here in Pennsylvania. He condemned the actions of the 301 predator priests and those who covered it up. So there has been some acknowledgement by the church at its highest level from the Pope that in fact these horrors did occur, and they've made a pledge to change it. Now, we can debate whether what they're doing is satisfactory or not, but the fact is, whether you look at it from a law enforcement perspective, a legislative perspective, or the perspective of the internal workings of the church, there has been significant action, all as a result of what we did here in Pennsylvania. And then the last thing I would say, and if you were expecting a 10-second answer, I apologize, John, but the last thing
I was looking like 7 minutes.
The last thing I would say to you is, I think what we started here in August, here in Pennsylvania, has led to a reckoning throughout this country. And in part, it is a reckoning within the Catholic Church. In part, it's led to a reckoning in Hollywood, politics, and business. And I think we're seeing more and more survivors, being believed, as they were here in the Attorney General's office, and the public feeling that they can reach out and know that someone's actually going to believe them and listen. That's significant.
You mentioned, obviously, the grand jury came up with the recommendations, and then the Republicans in the Senate, and the insurance industry, and the bishops continue to maintain this, that you can't do the key reform, the retroactive civil window constitutionally. Mm-hmm. Now, Can you? I know you can't tell me what the grand jury did, but can you explain to me why you disagree as an attorney general with as far as the constitutionality?
Sure. I mean, I've provided legal analysis to the Senate and to other lawmakers as to why the the approach on creating a 2-year civil window is constitutional, and I'll see if Grace can share that with you, or at least the public.
Okay.
Document. We're happy to give it to you, John, if you're interested.
Yeah.
So I think it's clear it's constitutional, and I hope that soon the Senate will pass it. What I find absolutely unconscionable is that the bishops are lobbying to stop these reforms from passing. I think you reported on this. They've spent millions of dollars here in Pennsylvania of parishioners' money, right, to lobby lawmakers to have less accountability and less protections for victims. There is one word that can adequately sum up that type of conduct by these bishops, and that is shameful.
So then, do you clearly then disagree with this movement to go with a constitutional amendment? That seems unnecessary.
I've said that publicly. I think it's unnecessary. Obviously, I've also said I'm a law enforcer, not a lawmaker. At some point, senators and representatives have to vote in a way that they think is appropriate. But I've made it very clear I think it's unnecessary. It just adds delay. It makes it harder for survivors to get some closure, harder for them to get the help they need to pay for their drug and alcohol, counseling and their mental health care and things like that.
Now, you mentioned sort of the irony of sort of our scandal, even though everyone has the same scandal. We apparently did a better job of documenting it. Has inspired so much change across the state.
Yeah.
What's your feeling, or across the country? What's your sense of why can't we get it done here?
Well, look, I think that's more of a question for some of the leaders in the Senate. I think it is going to get done. I'm someone who is patient and an eternal optimist, and I think at the end of the day, the voices of the survivors will win the day.
Switch gears to the other thing that we write about every other week, the opioid epidemic.
Yeah.
Obviously, you launched the lawsuit against the pharmaceutical company, and can you speak to sort of why that pharmaceutical company, and are there more?
I felt that Purdue was not being serious with us in our discussions with them, and I also felt that after an extensive investigation, we had enough evidence to be able to file our lawsuit. And understand, and you've covered this maybe more than anyone else, we are not the first state to sue Purdue. In fact, we're not even the first government entity in Pennsylvania to sue Purdue. But we are unique in the entire nation in that our lawsuit shows the direct connection between the corporate executives at Purdue and the detailers or the drug reps who are going out to doctors' offices, wrongfully pushing this product, lying about its addictive qualities, suggesting that it was not addictive at all. And I think our lawsuit stands out quite a bit, and my goal is to recover for the people of Pennsylvania. Now, this is part of a broader effort, which I have publicly acknowledged, which is we are leading a 41-state coalition investigating 6 opioid manufacturers and 3 distributors. And I can tell you, without getting into any details, I am investing a significant sum of my time all over this country to try to work with my colleagues in order to bring about some resolution to this. It's not something I can get into here in this setting, but I think we're making some good progress and hope to be able to come back and share some news with you in the coming months.
Now, as a citizen, sort of, what does the public gain when the state kind of goes after corporations like that?
Well, okay. Let's look at this opioid crisis that's claiming the lives of 12 Pennsylvanians every single day. And, in the Johnstown area, which you cover, and other areas in that region, they are particularly hard hit.
Right.
We know this crisis knows no municipal bounds. Black, white, brown, rich, poor, rural, urban, suburban, male, female. it claims the lives of people indiscriminately. Now, we can also draw a direct line between the decisions that were made in boardrooms like those at Purdue and the dealing that's happening, in the center of town in Johnstown. The opioid crisis we face today is entirely man and woman made. It was made because of corporate greed and the decisions by these pharmaceutical executives to push this product that they knew was addictive out into the marketplace. And when people can no longer get access to pills or afford pills, they buy heroin. Right. And sometimes people will say to me, not you, but I think it's important from a reporting perspective that people know this. They'll say, well, I understand if you're taking an OxyContin, what does that have to do with heroin? It's literally the exact same chemical makeup. And today in Pennsylvania, you can buy fentanyl, which is an even more potent, sort of form of heroin, if you will, for 77 cents a bag. Think about that. So you get hooked on these pills because of the corporate greed coming from pharmaceutical companies like Purdue. And when you can no longer afford those pills and you can no longer get them legally, you can go to the streets of Pennsylvania and buy a bag of fentanyl for 77 cents. It's everywhere. And I think these pharmaceutical companies need to be held accountable. And so when you ask me, what should the people of Pennsylvania think when you sue a pharmaceutical company for their role in the crisis? What they should think is that I understand the origins of this crisis, and I'm dealing with it not only in the boardrooms of pharmaceutical companies, but as you know, on the street corners of Cambria and Blair and all these areas where we've arrested literally hundreds of drug dealers since I've been in office.
The other issue I wanted to go after was, I don't know that we've talked about this before. There's been a lot of talk about marijuana, both on the medical and now the recreational side. Is there anything that you can do or you would consider doing to kind of help medical marijuana patients in light of the federal government's prohibition against?
Well, look, we've actually, I lead a task force of prosecutors from around the country with the Attorney General of the United States. So I take a group of attorneys general and district attorneys, and we meet a few times a year with the Attorney General. So before sessions, now bar. And one of the topics we've talked about, because we come from states where marijuana has been legalized in some form or fashion, is how do we deal with the currency issues, banking issues, for example, in light of the federal laws on it? And, I think we're trying to work through it. I don't have a very good answer given the federal laws, but I can tell you it's something that we're actively engaged in. I'm doing everything I can to protect Pennsylvania's interests where we've legalized medicinal marijuana.
Do you have an opinion about whether or not the state should do recreational?
I think that's up to the lawmakers. What I would say is, from a criminal justice perspective, if they do go forward and legalize it, there has to be an expungement system set up to be able to deal with those who are sitting in jail today for dealing marijuana. And I think that's an important part of it. But, look, they're going to figure out what to do on their end. My job is to enforce the laws on the books and, to do that in a responsible way, and that's what we do. Thanks, John. Good to see you.